Have you ever thought about what happens when a voice that just perfectly captures an entire decade, suddenly goes silent? Today we're diving into the incredible story of H.L. Mencken and his magazine, The American Mercury. It was a publication that totally embodied the rebellious spirit of the Jazz Age, only to be made irrelevant, almost overnight, by the harsh realities of history.
You know, this quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of Mencken's power. See, he wasn't just selling articles and essays, he was selling an identity. You have to remember, this was a generation coming out of a devastating world war. They were cynical, they were disillusioned, and Mencken gave them something new to believe in, their own intellectual superiority. It was a way to feel smarter than the very system that had, in their eyes, failed so completely.
So, to really get why Mencken's voice resonated so deeply, we first have to take a look at the decade he was speaking to. In the 1920s, well, they weren't just about flappers and jazz. They were a battleground for ideas, a full-blown culture war. I mean, the contradictions of the era were just staggering. You had Prohibition, which just forced drinking underground into secret speakeasies. You had a revived Ku Klux Klan marching in the streets, while women were gaining new freedoms. And then you had the famous Scopes monkey trial, which was basically modern science versus religious fundamentalism on a national stage. It was into this total chaos that Mencken arrived.
And he didn't just show up with an opinion. No, he came armed with a weapon, one designed specifically for this fight, a brand new magazine with a very distinct look and an even more distinct attitude.
Now, Mencken had already made a name for himself at a magazine called The Smart Set. It's where he and his partner, George Jean Nathan, really took some swings at the old literary guard. But he felt boxed in by its high society roots. He wanted something with sharper teeth, something bolder that could talk directly to the rebels and the skeptics of the day.
And so, in January 1924, he launched The American Mercury. And with its signature green cover, it was an immediate hit. Carrying it around wasn't just about reading, it was a statement. It told the world you were part of a new, skeptical, and frankly, sophisticated club. So who was reading this thing? Well, it was the educated crowd. College students who wanted to challenge their professors, young professionals who had moved to the city and left their small-town roots behind. Really, it was for anyone who felt like they had outgrown the, let's say, mainstream values of America. The world of Sunday school, Rotary Club meetings, and the Saturday Evening Post.
For this brilliant, fiery window in the mid-1920s, the magazine and its editor were at the absolute center of American culture. Mencken wasn't just another journalist, he was a full-blown phenomenon.
Seriously, it's hard to overstate just how huge his influence was. His words were everywhere. College students were quoting his witty takedowns in class, and politicians were genuinely terrified of ending up as the target of one of his blistering editorials. He was setting the intellectual tone for an entire generation.
And every single month, like clockwork, he aimed his fire at the same pillars of American life. He relentlessly mocked Puritanism, the absurdity of prohibition, what he called democratic mediocrity, and the pompous attitudes of academics and religious leaders. That consistency, that was a huge part of his appeal. You always knew what you were going to get.
And here's the beautiful irony. Every single time the so-called guardians of public morality attacked him in public, it just made him more popular. For his readers, those attacks were a badge of honor. And for the magazine, it was basically free advertising that sent circulation numbers soaring.
But then, the party ended. In October of 1929, the stock market crashed, and the whole cultural landscape that made Mencken a star was just wiped out, almost overnight.
Think about it. Mencken's entire brand was built on this sort of aristocratic scorn for the average person. But when that average person was suddenly standing in a breadline, unemployed and desperate, well, that scorn didn't feel witty or provocative anymore. It just felt cruel. What's really stunning is just how fast it all unraveled. This timeline says it all. He launches in 24. He's at his peak just a couple of years later. And by 1933, less than a decade from the start, he's resigning as editor, his influence completely shattered. The rise was meteoric, yeah, but the fall was just as fast. So the story of the American Mercury isn't just about one man or one magazine. It's a really powerful lesson in how quickly a voice, no matter how powerful it is, can become a relic when the world it's speaking to just disappears.
All of a sudden, the national conversation wasn't about prohibition anymore. It was about survival, about economic justice, about collective action. Mencken's whole brand of defiant libertarian skepticism was totally replaced by the New Deal liberalism of FDR. It was a completely different intellectual fashion for a completely different time.
And Mencken, he never really got his footing again. He was a master at playing the music of the Jazz Age, but when the music changed to the somber tones of the Great Depression, his instrument was just hopelessly out of tune. He became a living reminder that even the biggest influence is almost always temporary.
Which, of course, leaves us with a huge question. Who are the great critics, the big, influential voices of our time? And maybe more importantly, what's the historical shift? What's the unexpected crash that could suddenly make them sound just as irrelevant as H.L. Mencken did back in 1933? It's something to think about.